It was a melancholy morning on the Virginia Tech College campus as students, teachers, and families tried to make sense of a horrific tragedy. A 23-year-old student had just shot and killed 32 other students, and finally himself. Once the scene had settled, many cried, "Why?" Investigators would later find out that this man not only lived a life of almost complete solitude, but was an avid player of the Call of Duty series, a video game where you strategically shoot down virtual opponents. MAVAV, Mothers Against Video Game Addiction and Violence, claim his actions originated from this murder simulator and are now advocating the end of the creation of such game. When Hunter Coffman is asked if he agrees with the correlation, he glances at his shelves of games and shakes his head no. One could easily argue he is biased. Hunter not only owns over 75 video games, but hopes to become a level designer, essentially spending hours with his eyes glued to a screen. It's simply a waste of time, his father declares. It's making him lazy. It's a common stereotype, the acne-ridden teenage guy who dispenses endless hours in pitch-dark rooms, shouting curse words at a faintly glowing screen. It's also lacking in truth. Hunter doesn't see video games as a medium of senseless violence, but instead as an art. How would you define art, I ask, curious how something like Pac-Man could be in the same category as the Mona Lisa?
Art, it's hard to define because there's so many different mediums and it's ever growing. Because like hundreds of years ago, many people just saw it as like paintings and such, but then like TV was added on, movies were added on, video games were added on rather recently, and we don't know what can come next. But art is pretty much like the expression of what your mind and what your mind sees.
On a physical level, Hunter is a seemingly average teen, a lately tanned 15-year-old with sandy blonde waves and a goofy smile. He hardly seems the type to enjoy performing a headshot on an unsuspecting opponent. While he does enjoy the occasional virtual killing spree, Hunter tends to play more story-based games, where you aren't simply shooting all these guys because you feel like it, but instead for a usually heroic purpose. At the age of 5, he was gifted Super Mario World 2 and poured hours into it along with his sister. A decade later, he has gone from saving kidnapped princesses to shotgunning down hordes of zombies, and has had plenty of fun. When asked to be an example, Hunter passionately was honest.
So, it parents just shows, don't always trust what you're told, because the first third of the story was spent blindly trusting what some guy was telling you, then finding out that the person who is supposedly the terrorist against a nation was actually the good guy, and the one you've been trusting was evil this whole time.
In the last year, Hunter has taken his enthusiasm for game playing and tried to begin a path towards contributing to the medium in a future career, level designing. Specifically, creating the in-game worlds that players explore through, and working at the details of lighting, object placement, and overall level layout. Just as a painter wants to create a tone that brings out their piece's inner meaning, so too does a level designer want to create a mood that brings out certain emotions from the player. Hunter works on his environments on his home computer, with a statue of Batman overlooking his every construct. He claims his favorite game posters going assassin and another with 4 gun-equipped citizens at a zombie-infested wilderness surround him to serve as inspiration.
The software to develop environment is pretty technical, and there's also a lot of coding and math that goes into placing everything. Something as simple as a marketplace can take over 5 hours to make.
Video games aren't the first new art medium to be accused of bestowing bad values. Silly as it may seem, comic books are claimed to be hurting America's youth in the early 1940s. The Family Circle, a then-current magazine, claimed it was unhealthy that comics portrayed fantasy lands, and that as children read them, they mentally became the hero as he took down the villain. It was called the anti-comic book movement. It began with an article written by Sterling North, who not only denounced the medium, but claimed that parents were guilty of criminal activities if they allowed their children to read comics. This led to public bonfires where adults took their children's books and threw them into flames, even though not all comics featured aggressive plots. study by researchers at the Indiana University School of Medicine supposedly shows that brain scans of kids who played violent video games showed an increase in emotional arousal and a corresponding decrease in activity in brain areas involving self-control, inhibition, and attention. Once again, parents were told to enter the equation, and laws have been passed restricting those under the age of 18 from purchasing violent games. While Hunter agrees that young children should not play games like Grand Theft Auto, where the player's main goal is to steal cars and evade the police, he believes it holds certain flaws.
Preschoolers and 17-year-olds are treated on the same level. It also tends to broadcast a negative light on the medium, and many people try to mend it into a form that isn't an art and claim for the creation to stop.
Not all researchers turn out negative either. David Wilson, a professor of communication at Ohio State University, says, clearly research has established there are links between playing violent video games and aggression, but it's an incomplete picture. He and his team of researchers have found that when games are played with friends, even the violent ones, cooperative tendencies were more likely and often canceled out aggression. To truly test their theory, researchers brought together two rivalry colleges, Ohio State and the University of Michigan. Not only were these colleges able to unite over the common ground of video games, but many acted like good friends, one noting that the cooperative play just wiped out any effect of who you were playing with. The cooperation makes you more willing to cooperate. Hunter has grown up with playing video games with his older sister, and can also vouch for these results.
Video games were always a way for my sister and I to get over those little sibling fights. I wish more people could be a part of it. When I enter the industry, I really want to try to help create games with the story and gameplay shine over the violence and bringing people together.
Although only a sophomore in high school, Hunter is already elated for the future. His eyes sparkle with excitement as he describes how he can't wait to go to school for game design and further his skills. Hunter acknowledges that having a strong education in math and science will only further his abilities, and has learned to balance reading and playing games while staying on track in school.
The final word is video games are hard. And many people take video games and make them into a sport. Is it actually hard? It's simply acting they should be respected and not seen as, oh, these incite violence among our youth. And video games can actually support it.